Testing. 1, 2, 3. Hey YouTube. So it is Saturday. Hey Laura, thanks for the sound check. It is actually Saturday. I checked and double checked. Um, Lurking and listening. Okay, Dan, welcome to the stream. Hey Bob, welcome to the stream. Yeah, I guess yesterday I was paying more attention to actually having a topic to talk about than I was what day it actually was. And I was excited because I thought of something to talk about, and I just started streaming, and lo and behold, it was Friday instead of Saturday. I've done that a couple of times. When you get retirement age, days kind of start rolling into each other, and you don't really pay attention to Friday or Saturday or the things that are so important when you're working and you're looking forward to the weekend when you don't have to work. I've always thought that it's interesting in grade school when I was a kid. I always looked forward to the summer. I know schools don't do exactly like we used to when I was a kid, where you had 3 months off in the summer, but time was. Hey, Cobweb Caverns, welcome to the stream. Hey, Daryl Deaver, welcome to the stream. I'm on the correct day. Um, time when I was a kid was the the getting through the school year to the summer, and then having 3 months off for summer, and that was how everything was geared up. And then when I got out of school and started working, things kind of sped up because it was about working the week and then being off. Cobweb Cavern says, my granny used to tell me when I was a kid, time gets faster as you get older. I thought she was talking nonsense, but I know now that Granny was right. Yep, Granny was right. Hey, G Bear, welcome to the stream. So when you enter the workaday world, you're geared up for a week, and then the weekend. And so time does kind of speed up in the sense that you're no longer, you know, looking for 8 or 9 months of school to pass and then have your 3 months off for the summer. Now you're looking for the week to pass. You got to get through 5 days of working, and then you get the weekend off. And it kind of changes how you perceive time, kind of changes the speed that things come at you. And now we've entered this modern era with social medias and 24/7 news bites and people attacking us on political angles and constant drumbeat. And as a retiree or a near retiree or someone who's no longer in the workforce, it just kind of changes the perception of time, at least for me. I just don't really connect with days of the week as opposed to weekends anymore. It's just, it's all pretty much up in the air, you know, it's just another day. So that's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. I just felt like it was Saturday and felt like I had a topic to talk about, and off I went. Oh well, at least I got a quick stream out. Um, I did notice that Jimmy is coming back to Ohio. I didn't catch it live, but the boys all did. A Pleco Whisperer. The boys all did a live stream yesterday evening, and Jimmy should be on his way by now if he woke up in any time. And if he's out there listening, I want you to drive safely, Jim. I remember sending you off to the far west, and I'm glad to see you coming back home. I'm assuming your reasoning is family, and that's a good reason to head back this way. I hope you find it just as attractive as you did before you left. Bob says breaking the routine is said to help slow time down. A vacation, protracted illness, anything that's not the usual gives the perception that things slow. Hey, Pleco Whisperer. Um, Pleco Whisperer is happy. That's always a good place to be. Um, I'm assuming that it is a fish-related topic. If not, I'm glad you're happy. But if it is, you can share it with us and it will give me something to ramble on about. Anyway, I'm looking forward to Jimmy being back in this part of the world. I've seen him a couple of times since he left at conventions and stuff. But and I never really visited Jimmy when he lived this close, except for when he got ready to leave, and I drove up there to buy tanks and fish before he took off. But mainly, what I wanted to do was to help him, give him enough money to um, make sure he had enough money for his gas and make sure his fish were going to a good home, that sort of thing. And I have kept his rainbows, um, the one group of them alive through progeny. Uh, we did manage to breed them. It was quite accidental, of course, which is the way a lot of breeding occurs. You know, my wife was putting Java moss in the 75 gallon with the rainbows, and she decided she didn't like the way Java moss looked, and I kind of don't blame her. Java moss kind of looks sketchy at best sometimes. And she had taken wads of it and stuck it in little crevices of rocks and stuff like that. And so she pulled it out, and at the time the uh, 20 tall that we use as a quarantine tank didn't have any plant material in it, so she pulled that Java moss back out and put it in the quarantine tank, and lo and behold, we had baby rainbows. And breeding fish, Tom Patterson says, just got home from the fish store starting a blackworm colony. Any pointers? And boy, Tom, you've got me on that one. I have never cultured black worms. I've always just bought them. Um, so yeah, Bob's giving you good advice. Don't overfeed. But that one's above my pay grade, Tom. Sorry. That's something that I don't really know about. Daryl says, I think I will be about 8 hours from where Jimmy ends up. A bit far for a fish room tour of everyone. I'm going to be closer than that. I've been to Akron several times. Um, my my first wife, um, was from Akron, so I've been up there a couple of times. There's not a whole lot there. The Football Hall of Fame and the Football Hall of Fame Stadium, and it's just another big gray northern tundra town, pretty much. And I'm sure people that are from Akron have a much different picture than I do of it, but feeding paper towel. Bob says he has 2 colonies that started themselves, one in a gravel substrate, one in sand. Gravel is the best. Mine only eat what falls into the gravel or the sand that the fish don't get. Well, Bob's got much more valuable information, Tom, than I do myself on that. Um, I've cultured micro worms. I've cultured vinegar eels. I've cultured quite a few live foods, but I've got to admit that black worms were always so readily available, and I just always bought instead of cultured. But I can see that if you were buying a lot of live black worms and feeding them, that they would seed a tank pretty quickly. If the fish didn't eat them right away, they'd get into the gravel, and then you would have your own. I, you've got to take into account my age and the experiences that I had long ago in the 70s and the 80s with with tube effects and black worms. We would go through periods of time in the 70s and 80s where the places that were culturing those critters were using such foul uh, media to grow them with that it was actually dangerous sometimes to feed your fish with those things. And I for that reason I have avoided tubifex worms in the past. Even the frozen tubifex worms were dangerous, and black worms were as well. And I say dangerous, but most of the time they weren't. It's just that every now and then you'd get a hold of a bad batch from a unscrupulous dealer or an unscrupulous company that wasn't really paying attention, and you could kill your fish literally from feeding them tubifex or black worms or a couple of other creatures that were similar. So fish keepers in that day and age kind of got leery about those things. They are for African dwarf frogs. Yeah, frogs are a cool thing, and I can see how they would really like those. And Tom says he's an hour away to get them, so they decided to start a tank for them. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that as being a smart move. I would just caution you to watch how they, it's just like everything else in the fish keeping world. You need to observe, observe, observe. I was watching KG Tropical's stream the other night, and Lisa, his wife, just made some excellent points about observation. And this is something that I go back to over and over and over again, is that you really need to spend time, not like it's a chore, not like it's someone standing over you with a whip saying, you've got to observe your fish. I don't mean it in that sense, because if it becomes that way for you, then the fish keeping hobby may not be something that you really need to spend time in. Because if actually paying attention to your fish is a chore for you, is something that you see as a waste of time, then you're probably not in the right game. You need to find something that you have a passion for. And one of our best tools, one of the things that mostly helps us defend against issues with our fish, is our power of observation, and how we have refined that power of observation. Blah, 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 blah. Hey, alien world. Welcome to the stream. We can, through the power of observation, learn what our fish's normal behaviors are. And the more you spend time watching fish, the more you will learn that each individual has its own idiosyncrasies, has its own behaviors, its own place in the pecking order, and sometimes that changes. And we can learn to see our fish in their natural, unnatural in the tank behaviors, and learn how they are feeling by watching them do their daily behavior pattern and carefully observing the things that they do, and then watching when they're not feeling well, when something's wrong, when the water quality's going south, when there's a dead fish in the tank and it's creating stress on all of them. If you carefully observe your fish when they're in a healthy, thriving state, and learn their behaviors and learn their normal activities, then when something varies from that, when you suddenly catch one of your fish doing something that you've never seen it do before, then one of the things that ought to click off in your head is that maybe something's wrong. And if maybe something's wrong, then I need to start checking for what it is that is wrong. Now, it's possible that your observation skills will alert you to the fact that suddenly those fish are in breeding behavior. It's obviously different from what they were doing before, but your fish are constantly talking to you. And, people try to act like fish are, lifeless automatons that just float endlessly in the weightlessness of water and don't ever pay attention to anything and have no emotions and have no uh, personalities. Nothing could be further from the truth. Those fish all have their own individual personalities. They all have their own species specific personalities. They all have learned behaviors. They all have um, genetic behaviors. And if you are a student of the behaviors of your fish and really spend time observing them, then you will begin to learn about your fish and learn about what your fish are telling you. And I would recommend that you do the same thing with your blackworms. Observe their behavior, observe their coloration, observe their conditioning, and watch how they act when they get food and watch how they act when they don't have food. And mostly that's going to be disappear back down into the gravel. But your powers of observation will tell you when those worms are not feeling right. VB23 has so many scuds in his tank. Well, you ought to have some clean plants, VB. Hey, Nisi, welcome to the stream. Were you sniffing last night, Nisi, on Jimmy's goodbye stream? I saw you donated heavily. I was proud of you for that. I'm supposed to be looking for light fixtures for the bathrooms. Okay, I'm not going to tell him. I'm sorry that I mentioned you by name. That was some other Doug. That was some other person by the name of Nisi. It's an 80-year-old Nisi from Bogota, Colombia. Not Nisi from Alaska. Oh, Jimmy leaving is sad in the sense that he's not going to be there for all of the things that he was there for when he was out west. But Jimmy was mostly behind the camera anyway. So we didn't really get to see a lot of Jimmy, you know. We got to see him when he did his own videos. But in all of Corey's videos, Jimmy's the one doing the filming. He's behind the camera all the time. So I'm kind of excited that he's going to be doing his own stuff again, you know. Well, yep, you're right, Nisi. And you're some of my favorite people too. Uh, I, I haven't helped this time to get him back here, but I helped plenty when he went out. So I know that he's been making good money, and I know that he's been basically living with Corey and his wife, Katie, and so I'm assuming Jimmy's got plenty of money to get home with and to start his new life with. I may be wrong. He may have spent it all on fixing his car up to get him home, but I'm not as concerned about Jimmy's financial wherewithal right now as I was when he was leaving to go out there. BB23 says, we need Fish Fam people to shorten their name so it's easier to type on here and highlight their name in chat. Yeah. And Scott Bernier says that he eats dogs. Well, there's a lot of cultures where dogs are eaten. One of my favorite dogs is a chow chow, and chow chows were bred in China for the emperor to eat. So, yeah, there are a lot of cultures where people eat dogs. But this is a fish channel, so we kind of try to keep it loosely around fish. And I basically got a mod wall, Scott. So how is my little dog? My little dog, Max. Come here. Come here. People are asking about you. Come on. Oh. There is my little dog. Max, Max, Max. Office Max. Oh, you can come sit in my lap. He's doing fine. We had to get a bunch of his teeth pulled. He's much older. He's much older than we thought he was. And so he's actually kind of an elderly dog. But he's doing fine. He's fitting right into the family. And I didn't realize Chihuahuas sleep as much as he does. VB23 needs to do a much needed water change. Cobweb says, I guess fish keeping is weird in that we eat versions of our pets. Well, at least I do. Just scoffed a cod supper. Yeah. Uh, most of the fish that we keep that are larger are food fish in the regions where they come from. And a lot of the fish that Europeans ooh and ah over that come from the United States. And we eat them as food. We see them as food fish. But the Europeans love to keep them in tanks. You know, there's a lot of laws in the United States about what you can and can't keep, native fish wise. Hey Pam, yes, it's Friday already, Pam. I know you don't get out of the house much anymore, but it's Friday already. Yeah, well, um, BB23 says, haha, fish we keep are for the most part too small to eat. And that's true too. There are a lot of nano fish that would never, I say never, but if you followed some of Corey's travels, and if you followed other people that live in um, Asian areas, they eat all that stuff. They eat Neocaridina shrimp. They eat little fish. There's people that eat just about everything. Bob says my 17-year-old Chihuahua Rico diagnosed with liver cancer. Oh, I'm so sorry, Bob. Uh, Doing home hospice, retired RN, so I can do his IVs and injections. He's in a good place right now, eating, walking, enjoying him while we can. I'm so sorry to hear that, Bob, and I'm happy for you that you are able to take care of his medical needs. Um, that Haley lost a pet not too long ago, and she was just devastated by it. Um, Oddball Aquatics, and it is, you know, people just think that having pets are pastime or they are a fringe benefit, and it is it is a responsibility when you take on a pet. And a lot of people still don't realize that you take on a duty and a responsibility when you care for a pet, when you take a pet into your home. And it is our job to be there for our pets when their life is ending. And it is our responsibility to know when it is time to flip the light switch for them, when it is time that they can't, in their own lives, in their own suffering. And it is our responsibility to, hey Valley Fish, welcome to the stream. It is our responsibility to know when it is time to take them out of their suffering, when their suffering outweighs their life, and that's our job, and it's our job to enjoy them and to celebrate their lives. It's our job to take good care of them. It's our job to see to their needs. And it's our job to take them as members of our family. And it's also our job and our responsibility to do for them what they cannot do for themselves. And it's always painful, painful, painful. Dogs don't live near as long as human beings do. You can expect a dog in 10 or 15, or Bob's gotten 17 years out of his Chihuahua. So inside of 20 years, you can expect for your pet to die. And you can be pretty sure that in a certain number of pets, you are going to have one that has some kind of critical illness that's going to create a situation where their suffering is greater than their ability to enjoy life. And it's going to be up to you to recognize that and to have them put down. And people have different varying opinions on that. That as long as they're alive, they should be left living. But I've learned through the years that there comes a point where their suffering is more important than my unwillingness to let go of them. And that's our job. That's our responsibility. It's the downside of a pet. By the same token, you can look at your fish the same way. There are some fish that are going to live long lives. Some goldfish, some bickers can live, 60, 40, 50 years. Some of them can, if they're treated properly and given a place to thrive and kept up well. But most of our fish are going to live a year or two, or maybe 5. If you get into the larger cichlids, you might get 10 or 12 years out of one. But we become highly attached to these fish, and they're going to die too. Now, it's much harder to decide when it's time to put a fish down, in the sense of if its quality of life is no longer worth leaving it alive. So pets in general are a joy and just integral parts of our lives. They become family, they become children, and yet when it's they are a responsibility as well. And Nisi was talking about spending 8,000 on her dog's surgery, and believe me, I know that feeling. Uh, we spent 5,000 on Rufus trying to get him over his liver problems, and you know, the cost of veterinary is skyrocketing. You know, I can remember. Hey, Joseph, welcome to the stream. I can remember when a normal visit to the vet cost you about 35 bucks. Medication, testing, all of it included. And you could go to a good old country vet and pay 25 bucks and maybe $38 for some kind of specialized surgery. And you were paying 60 or 70 bucks for stuff that's now in the thousands of dollars, you know. Well, BB says vet and Medicare should be a right. I'm not sure you can convince the wider population that they should be paying, subsidizing for us to have pets and for them to have what a lot of people would consider as pointless medical testing and stuff like that. You know, a lot of those people would just tell you to take the dog out behind the barn and shoot it in the head and go on, rather than spend $5,000 on a pet, you know. But those people do not consider those pets as part of their family. And most of us that keep fish do. Most of us that are invested in keeping fish keep pets as part of our family. They're not some adornment. They're not some status symbol. Joseph says, if I keep the TDS under 100 and feed live food, those blue tetras spawn like crazy. That's awesome, Joseph. I'm so jelly that you're able to. How are your nigrocinctus doing? I enjoy mine every day. And Joseph, I've thought about the issues that you're having, and this is anecdotal information, which means that it's not scientifically proven. 8 healthy Imperials, awesome. Well, that's about what I've got too. That's about what ended up surviving out of the group I got too. The one thing that I can offer you, Joseph, as a potential possibility of what might be causing your issue, what are the temperatures that you're running in the tank with those nigrocinctus in it? I have been keeping mine in the 70 to 75 degree temperature range. Joseph lost his angels. I'm sorry to hear that, Joseph. That sucks, man. Yeah, sometimes keeping fish together can create problems. You know that I have not medicated, knock on wood, I have not medicated any of the fish that I got from Peru at all. But I do think that lower temperatures, water temperature in my tanks is 75. Well, that should be decent. But I'm wondering, as because of the temperatures that you've been fighting lately, you get power outages and like you turn the temperatures, turn the air conditioner off to do your live streams and stuff. I'm just wondering if the temperatures that your tanks are getting to, yeah. Well, part of what has caused me to reach this conclusion is those rainbows that that I kept for Jimmy, that I got from Jimmy, and I kept from Jimmy for Jimmy. And I noticed that Jeremy, Sergeant Tank, had the same problem. That they had a some kind of parasite that was so pernicious that I could not, no matter what kind of medication I put in that tank, I could not stop those fish from dying. But what I began to realize was that I had a heater in that tank, and the heater was keeping it above 76 degrees in that tank at all times. And after countless battles and rounds of medicating, and I finally settled on feeding them fenbendazole flakes, and that seemed to do as much good for them as anything else. But they kept getting reinfected, and finally, that heater in that tank went bad, and I didn't realize it for a while. And the temperatures started dropping in that tank, and I started noticing that the fish weren't exhibiting the signs of the parasitic infection anymore or dying. And I think it was basically the temperature that was causing those parasites to be so out of control that if they were above 76, 78 degrees, that those parasites just continuously kept reinfecting those fish. And occasionally now I have to treat them again, and what I've started doing is just feeding them fenbendazole flakes for a week straight. They get nothing but fenbendazole flakes for a week straight, and then I stop. And it really seems to be slowly knocking it out. And I guess what I'm getting at is that the temperature in that tank was allowing for such a short life cycle. Those parasites were reinfecting the fish so quickly that they just stayed infected all the time. And I was just wondering if maybe that's what was going on with your nigricinctus, is that they were reaching temperatures that are far above what they're used to in the wild, and that was causing a natural parasite that they've carried with them forever that doesn't usually bother them very much, but in a higher temperature situation has caused them to, actually display illness. Now, that may not be true, Joseph. You may have that all completely under control, and it may be something else entirely. But VB23 just got his report card, and it says I am ranked 3 of 503. You could say I'm truly a fish nerd. Well, Joseph says it was an external parasite. It did not spread easily to another fish. All right. Well, I was sorry to see you go through that, man. Sorry to see that. I mean, basically, I had zero luck with the blue tetras. whatever my system and whatever my water was not to their liking at all. Like if they had it until they died, the rest are fine. Maybe it came from within, I don't know. Well, our fish naturally carry diseases. We as human beings naturally carry diseases. You know, VV23 got straight A pluses. Well, congratulations, man. But he's got no money. Well, I'm going to tell you one thing about that, VB23. And education is something that no one can take away from you. They can steal your money. They can steal your spouses. They can steal your cars. They can steal everything. Alien World Aquatics, thanks for dropping by. And the one thing that no one can take away from you besides your own internal personal dignity, and they can beat a lot of that out of you, is an education. They cannot take an education away from you. All right, guys, we're winding up to the top of the hour. If you've got some questions for me, now would be a good time to give me to wind up to try to answer a question. Dan Slee says the 49-gallon bow front breakdown has begun. It takes me a minute to respond. Yeah, Dan, I'm cheering you on, man. Breaking down larger tanks is kind of a chore. I mean, you get used to it after a while. Nisi says, depends on the school. My daughter ended last year with a 4.0 and ranked 97 in 127. Yeah. This is why I don't use the laptop to type. Well, that's all right, Nisi. You type it as you see it. Dan says it helps that I had the mega auction to unload stuff at today. Yeah, that's one good thing about club auctions is to get rid of stuff that you no longer want. When I first got back into the fish keeping, when I was dry for about 4 years, and just not too long before I started my YouTube channel, I decided to go wet again because I wanted to get L260s and try to breed them. Nisi says, I used blasting sand for the 180-gallon last go around. I'm not so keen on it this time. What would you use for a planted goldfish Danio tank? Nisi, that's a good question, but it's not eco-complete. Okay, well, see, most of the brand names that you're going to buy or are going to be outrageously expensive. Outrageous in the sense that if you're filling up 180 gallons with them, I think I remember spending about $150 for just one half of my 110 gallons. So you would probably look to spend more than that. I guess my best advice would be to go find like a quarter of a pea size gravel. just buy a normal gravel. Um, if if you go to a local um, um construction place that deals with rocks and gravels, you may be able to find a very small gravel. You know, I'm talking about something smaller, talking about smaller than the head of a pencil, you know, smaller than a pencil eraser size. And we used to always call that pea gravel, but pea gravel is actually small, larger. So if you can just go find a relatively small gravel, then I would recommend using that. Now, gravel just by itself, without fish maul in it, isn't going to be very nutritious for plants. So you're probably going to have to amend that gravel with root tabs or regular um, fertilizers or something like that. But if you listen to Dustin's fish tanks, um, he will tell you that plants feed mostly at their roots. So I would definitely recommend that you put some kind of amendment to that gravel around the plant's roots. Now you can do that lots of different ways. I'm sure Lucas could give you good advice in that area. I My wife has a green thumb. She's a botanist. I have relatively little experience with keeping plants alive. I'm just not very good at it. I seem to be able to keep moss alive. I don't have any problem doing that. But I'm just not very good at keeping plants alive. So I'm probably not the right one to ask plant questions. I just have a fine sand in with my goldfish. I don't like gravel with them because of choking and because food gets down between the gravel. Well, if you're not going to go sand and if you're not going to go gravel, I'm not really sure what to tell you. I suppose you could go. Um, I suppose you could go natural dirt. The soil in Alaska is known to be really great soil in places. I suppose you could go with a dirted tank, but I would recommend that you put a small layer of, uh, of sand over the top of it so that when you pull a plant out, it doesn't make a big black cloud in your water. Joseph's over there recommending Brightwell. I am not. Um, I have never used Brightwell, so I'm not really capable of recommending that. Um, it looks like my lunch is here. All right, guys, I'm going to cut this short. Maybe use pots to hold the plants and sand for the actual tank. Well, that's always a possibility, Nisi. You can even you can even section off small areas of the tank. My tank is divided in half. Half of it is sand, my 110 gallon. Half of it is sand, and half of it is gravel. And I've got 3 inches of Eco Complete with an inch of heavier gravel on top of it. I've never experienced Brightwell. You may have some ammonia spikes with Brightwell. I don't know. But, you know, each individual kind, uh, well, good luck looking for bathroom fixtures. All right, guys, I'm out of here. Thank you for dropping by and spending some of your valuable time with me here on Saturday. Um, good luck with your fish. I'm going to go eat my lunch.